Point Fortin constituency, one more, we have a focus on agriculture. So within the constituency of Point Fortin, even if you live in New Village, or if you live in Erie, in Buenos Aires, and of course if you live in Cedros, Chatham, Captiville, farming is a way of life. All right? In the constituency, we have farmers and we have fisher folk. The next presentation that my campaign manager will introduce are friends of mine, and they are from organized farming communities. You know, an organized farming community is something that I've been encouraging persons to get going. So we met with Chatham farmers, young guys, and I encouraged them to form a farmers association. That was up to last week. New Village, there were some guys farming on a 19-acre parcel, and they got 6 acres up to production. And I encouraged them 3 months ago, and they formed since the New Village Farmers Association, which is in formation. And that helps because you have positive reinforcement in the community. And again, you create employment. You sustain yourself, and then it helps with spin-off businesses. So for example, some of the guys in New Village, they are planting, they have pineapples on the ground, they have pawpaw on the ground, and they do their own fruit bowls, and they sell it to the supermarkets in Point Fortin. So as you go down Coromandel, you have the watermelon guys, the pawpaw guys, you have guys doing pepper. We all know Cedros is famous for coconut on the estates. But we have different operations happening across the constituency. And ironically, we are above our agro shop. All right? And there's one on the corner and there's one behind the market. But the ones here are one of the most busy in Point Fortin. So we are familiar with the cost of some of these things. Agriculture is a business. Right now we've coined in Trinidad and Tobago the phrase agripreneurs. So you have entrepreneurs, you have agripreneurs. The food import bill is significant, and many of the items that you engage in, we import. A simple example is goat's milk. When I was working with the Goat and Sheep Society, as part of the Ministry of Labor, as a business development officer, over 95% of the goat's milk consumed in Trinidad and Tobago was imported then. That was about 15 years ago. So you have opportunity in agriculture to do two things. Save foreign exchange, because you don't have to import the items. Earn foreign exchange if you can export. And create employment within the community, as well as form the basis for agriculture-based manufacturing. And the focus for the political leader from Captiville to Icacos, across the Erin, that southwest peninsula, is to have agriculture-based manufacturing. To have agriculture-based manufacturing, you need to have first agriculture. All right? So I'll ask Keisha Grant, so you can give her a nice little round of applause to push the energy. All right? Who will come and introduce our next presenter, who have come here free of charge, and they're giving their time to share with you in Point Fortin on what you can do to create employment on your own. Anyone interested in doing their own farming project, please also sign up or register on that specifically and indicate to us what are the things you would need in terms of cost to get your acreage up to production, so that we can now approach the government when it's time for the budget, when we are in government, to know exactly what is required in Point Fortin for farming to work. So Keisha Grant.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd just like to say thank you all for coming, and thank you to our viewers who are looking on live on Facebook stream. This afternoon, we would like to introduce our first presenter, Mr. Gautam Maharaj and Mr. Omardath Maharaj. Mr. Gautam Maharaj is from the Penal Food Crop Association, and Mr. Omardath Maharaj is from the Agricultural is from the Breadfruit Trees Project. He's an agricultural economist, right? So please give him a round of applause. Give them a round of applause as they come.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I will take off my mask, and for those who are looking at this stream, I would just like to share that everyone here has their mask and is adhering to COVID protocols, which is very good. That's commendable here in Point Fortin. I feel very happy to be here in Point Fortin. I used to come here as a child. Lal's Photo Studio is my uncle, so I used to be here every carnival. And from what I've been hearing, what Mr. Obika had been saying, you all are already, and some people are already into agriculture, into production. So I think that is good. It feels good to be here to listen that is happening already. Agriculture, and I'm also competing with the thunder. Agriculture, when you hear the term agriculture, naturally sometimes you think fork, hoe, tall boots, hard work. It comes to mind. But as the previous speaker said, agriculture is a business. So this is a career seminar, and people are here obviously to chart a career path, to look at some way of money making, some type of business. And the answer is yes. Agriculture does provide an income that one can attend to their family and all of their needs. What entails, therefore, being successful in agriculture? What will prompt you to get into agriculture? Agriculture in itself, one part of it, which is the part that we are very familiar with, is production. That is where you grow crops and you produce vegetables and fruits. And in the case of the dairy products and the fisher folk, they have fish for sale. And there's one model where people take that to the market where you get it retailed off and you make money. And there's another part where the wholesalers, they produce large volumes and they sell it off at wholesale prices. So you would hear of Namdevco Wholesale Market, Makoya Wholesale Market. And also, in that is what people coin, in inverted commas, as middlemen. People who buy off at the farm gate, they buy at farm gate prices, which is lower. They put a markup and they sell it now for retailers, for consumers. So that's the chain there in terms of production. Upstream of that would be the chemical providers, what we call the agro shop. And as Mr. Obika said, we are right here above an agro shop, and you'll see people coming in and buying their chemicals and so on, pesticides, fungicides, to apply to the crops. They spray it on mist blower or spray cans and so on. So there's the chemical business, the agro business that is there. And in that business is not just someone selling a chemical. There are agronomists associated with it. There are salesperson, because it's a procurement part of it. They would have to buy it from somewhere in Costa Rica or in Germany or Santo Domingo and bring in those chemicals. Here in Trinidad, we have at the Point Lisa's facility, Yara, and we had previously Fertrin that manufactures salt. And then there would be a chain of work in that area where people would procure. They would have the customs part of it. They would have the merchandisers. They would have the people who work trolleying those goods onto the chemical areas. Then the farmers go and purchase it. So I'm creating the picture that is not agriculture, is much wider than sometimes we make it out to be. That there are upstream sides of it. There's research and development. You would be familiar with the extension services. There are persons who would have gone to ECIAF and they would have studied agriculture. They would have returned into the sector and they work as a public servant through the Ministry of Agriculture at the extension offices. So there are veterinary services at the extension offices. There are persons who look at water management. There are planners. There are persons who help in disease control. There are persons who help you with soil and all of the aspects related to soil and the topography and so on. So all of these are services rendered by the extension services arm of the Ministry of Agriculture. So it means that you can find your way in there. ECIAF is the institution. The University of the West Indies is another institution. And there's also, and I'm moving a bit with some pace because of the time frame I have, and there's the downstream part of agriculture. So there's the aspect of what we call value adding or processing, agro-processing. where after the fruit has been produced or the vegetable has been produced, there's an area such as preservatives, such as juices, such as you have the Pineapple Farmers Association, which you hear a lot of. Sesame Street came to Trinidad to be part of the Pineapple Farmers venture, and I found that to be such a nice thing. And the pineapples get into pizzas. So there are avenues, even if you're not into what I call the fork and hoe and tall boots part of the business or of the sector, there's the downstream part. A lot of people I know, they do the preservatives as small as a cottage approach. They have small arrangement home with the buckets, and they do that obviously guided by institutions such as Kariri and by the Food and Drug Administration and so on. You must adhere to the policies and the standards. But the sector is wide. The fisher folk is a large area, the fishing industry, and there has been a huge drive previously on the tilapia industry to grow tilapia locally, and people would fillet it, have it packaged and available for sale. All of this requires discipline, so that it is not, I would say obviously it's not an easy task, but there is potential in it for the purpose which you are here, potential in terms of making yourself, getting yourself a job, or being an entrepreneur yourself, as the previous speaker said, agripreneur. There's room in this sector for it. One area I would like to touch on outside of that nitty-gritty is, what is the relationship? We are here in Point Fortin, and when we think of government in Port of Spain, more or less. I am from a rural village also. I am from Pinal Barakpo. So you feel that remoteness sometimes. And what is the relationship between government and a sector like agriculture? It is very simple, but it is an important relationship. Policy, legislation and policy is what drives everything. So if you have a government that sees a future in agriculture and wants to boost and bolster agriculture, you would observe that the budget is higher. So if you observe in previous budgets, let's take for instance the UNC budget, one fiscal year would be in the area of $1.2 billion. Yeah? And you look at over years, that would have been cut to a current, I'm hearing of 700 million, 500 million, all of that. It is telling you something. It is telling you that the interest is not there. So you have to look at pushing your government so that they keep a focus on agriculture. Yeah? And from what I am seeing, I spoke of the budget. I gave you an example of one government versus the other. You have also legislation, and legislation ties in with, let's say, for instance, the judicial process of predial larceny. Predial larceny accounts for a major loss in farms, almost 18% of farm output. If you have a quick judicial process that does an investigation and a hearing within a day or a couple of weeks, it means you will be encouraged to do reporting of theft and you will follow up on it. If it's just sitting there idly by, like for instance, the entire central and south region currently is manned by just a couple officers of the predial larceny unit. That has to change, because what you want is that so long as there's a theft report, immediate action, people available to deal with it, maybe at the community level here, a substation or something of the sort. So I'm creating that nexus between agriculture, where you work, and the art that you do in terms of planting, producing, or making a juice or a preservative, and government, which is very important for supporting you with that legislation. For example, export legislation to support export, legislation for cheaper importation of items that you may need, raw materials, and reduction in the import bill. So let's say we can produce those. We used to produce hot peppers for sale, and we lost that market. Yeah? He's agricultural economists would know that and know all the statistics behind it. We lost the hot pepper market. Notwithstanding, we have the Scotch bonnet, the Moruga red, the Moruga scorpion, and all of that. That is world class. Required in the UK, required in the United States. I was an exporter at one point in time to the United States. And why all of that fell down? You need cargo carriers, you need chilling facilities, you need legislation to support it. So you reduce importation on areas that your farmers can produce. This is how the nexus between agriculture and government takes place. So there is a relationship. We are in the election season, obviously for you to play out into your mind also as to how you play a role in developing your own future. I will hand over now to, I didn't take a note of the time, but we're sharing the time space here, so I'll hand over to Omardat, and I'll be right here, so maybe if I have needed for anything. Omardat?
Thank you for the invitation to be here this morning. And more importantly, thank you for the opportunity to speak about agriculture and what I feel it really means for all of us here, each one of us, maybe 1.4 million of us in Trinidad and Tobago, all right? Gautam is, of course, far older than I, but it's just to say that I like people to appreciate that I personally have been far and long coming in this conversation about agriculture. I've had opportunities, I mean, some of you are younger than I in the room, and some of you are, of course, older. But my opportunities allowed me to appreciate what food production really means, not only for my family or for my community, that would be very selfish, but it really opened my mind into educating people about the meaning of agriculture. Gautam would have spoken about different views on the sector. For example, he spoke about production, he spoke about after your harvest, you could look at processing and cottage industries and so on. But the agriculture sector, if you look at it that way, there are really three main stages or three windows for access. So there's an input side into agriculture. There are people who produce, of course, all the chemicals, all of that, all the labor and so on. But they also produce seedlings. There are people who harvest seeds as seed banks and so on, and provide germplasm. They provide semen, animal semen, broodstock, and all of that to allow us to produce healthy, wholesome food, all right? Which takes us to the next stage where there are people who are involved in production. So, of course, we know farmers, they are the limelight. We know fisher folk. We know people who are involved in aquaponics. We know people who produce all sorts of things. People who are into home gardening now, for example, we have a fairly large home gardening movement. I have something we call the yard market. You can check it out on Facebook. And it's really to show how household people, we don't have no access to land, but how you at home could still make a difference. That difference is you provide your body with, of course, healthy, wholesome food. You know what goes into that food production. You could take care of the immediate needs of your family, and you could sell some. Is a direct form of economic benefit. And then there are all the other psychological benefits of producing things. There's recreation, stress relief, getting children involved more importantly. And afterwards there's processing, which is post-harvest handling and so on that Gautam alluded to. But just to backtrack a little bit, my interest that I was invited here today is to share with you really our breadfruit trees project. And we have this little slogan, and there's a logo to go with the conversation in terms of the breadfruit. But the main line after what I've completed what I wanted to say today is really for you to appreciate the fact that if you give a man a breadfruit, I'll feed him for today, if I gave you the fruit. But if I give you a breadfruit tree, that will feed you and your families for the rest of your lives. Right? So at the end of the few minutes I have, I'd like you to appreciate that, because the opportunities I spoke about led me to India in 2018. And while in India, I visited Uttar Pradesh, very large state in India, but that state is known for something. It's known for poverty. And the statistics will tell us that 9% of the world's poor, these are people who live in absolute poverty. I hope all of us could appreciate what we mean by absolute poverty. 9% of those people are concentrated in India, but 20% of them live in the state of Uttar Pradesh. While I was in India for that month, we went into some of those villages where these people exist. And contrary to popular belief, contrary to Western media and all the things you've seen, yes, there's certain socioeconomic challenges, but they have very prosperous agriculture. And the government of India has been able to leverage that sector to empower its people. Trinidad and Tobago is just one little village in India. We are 1.5 million people. The population of India is 1.3 billion people. So while we dispute how we could feed ourselves, why we can't, why we cannot, and so on, they are getting it done. And it's simply to say that we don't need to spend money inventing new ideas and doing all of these things. we could simply look at best practice in the world, see what fits into our ecological and environmental space that could help our people prosper and press forward. So I appreciated what it means to feed people in India, and I appreciated how they have a direct link between those grassroots people and what happens at a policy level straight up to the government of India. So they afforded me, of course, knowledge of different programs and projects they had, especially women empowerment in rural areas. And another time we could talk about the subcultures that happen in rural places and rural communities, especially as we are here in Point Fortin for that conversation. And then I also had opportunities to be in China twice looking at the same thing. In India, I looked at financing inclusive agriculture and rural development. In China, I looked at policy planning and development in agriculture. So while we know China as a manufacturing powerhouse and so on, they would tell you that it is agriculture that had led the growth path for China. And the second time I was in China, I was able to look at food safety management and agricultural products. How it is we move from the field when we have all these large production of whichever commodity, meats and seafood and so on. How it is you turn that into a product for the shelf. How it is you move that along value chains, along the world and so on. And it really doesn't take super enterprises. It doesn't really take fancy $1 million investments. It takes people with ideas. It takes younger people who have the drive to see it through. And it takes experience of the older folk either involved in the industry or those who are willing to provide mentorship to them. And on that experience, I went to a soy sauce factory. You know a soy sauce factory? Soy sauce. We have it on all Chinese foods. I went to one of those manufacturing things. And they produce on a daily basis maybe 4 million bottles of soy sauce. One company. Right? So, I mean, we consume a lot of that here in this country. So imagine the size of business they do. But when we talk about pepper in Trinidad, we talk about pepper spray as being a big industry down the line. But all we could find is pepper sauce. You understand? There's so much potential from the local foods, the versatility of local foods, that we are still to explore. And Gautam made a point about food import dependency, which is very concerning issue, of course. And the statistics will tell us that we import anywhere on an average year now between 5 to 6 billion TT dollars in food. Now, not all of that me and you consume. Not all of that we go in the grocery and we buy a pack of something that is imported. A large proportion of that is concentrates and intermediate products. All right? Now, this is like tomato paste, for example. Tomato paste would land at the port of Port of Spain via cargo boat, and it will move to an industrial estate like in Diego Martin. And that tomato paste will create ketchup that we could come down here in Point Fortin and buy a pack of ketchup for $60. Agreed? But that tomato paste, wherever it started to come here, it created thousands of jobs. That tomato paste created security, it created people in marketing, it created for food technologists, factory workers, truck drivers, all of those people benefit. So you don't only have to demonize food imports to that extent. But I think, which I've always said over the years, is we need to focus on the imports of things that we could produce locally, which are things that directly compete with farmers and fishermen. So for example, when we import fresh fruits, we import vegetables. Yes, we do consume a large, maybe over $100 million plus in different types of each meat every year. Dairy products, for example, phenomenal imports. All right? Now, we might say we don't have a livestock sector that could support that. We don't have dairy products that could support that. But it says to us that there is opportunity because people eating it anyway. I don't need to teach you how to eat goat meat. Once you see goat meat, you know how to behave. Your curry comes to your mind and all the other things that go with it. Not so? So we know how to eat and we know food. And maybe it is on that basis, as he said, in 2017 we were able to attract Sesame Street here to Trinidad. And Sesame Street went in George Village in Moruga Tableland. And they featured some of our finest farmers, but it featured our finest fruits. That Tableland Sugarloaf pineapple. And right now we are working with the farmers there to register or to see if we could register that variety for geographic indication, which is a form of intellectual property. But it means that on the export market, if ever they in that region could boost production to export, they could negotiate for a higher price. That pineapple is worth more than one you could find in Costa Rica or wherever has hundreds of thousands of acres of production. It's a differentiated product. So intellectual property in agriculture also allows us different things. Territorial marketing in agriculture. For example, all of us know Maracas Bacon Shack. Or we know about Davy Doubles. You know? Different things, different regions known for important, for example, should investigate and see what you are known here for, what it is you could grow to encourage domestic tourism, whether it be for food and culinary arts, whether it be for fish fry, you know what I mean, whatever it be. And that is your selling point here, to bring people to Point Fortin. Not only to come and tell you about ideas, the next time I come here, I should be able to go to your major selling point and benefit from the best of the hands in this region. So these are some of the ideas and the insights I have. But more importantly, when I look back at my country, we are involved in a lot of advocacy, a lot of education, things in entrepreneurship and so on. But I had this idea, and we read about it online, and I said things are happening in the world. And there's this NGO called the Trees That Feed Foundation. And like us, they are not the only motivator. They are supportive people who, of course, pay for these things. These trees are very expensive. The paraphernalia that supports why breadfruit. People ask me, I have a breadfruit jersey today. And they say, why breadfruit? What it is about this thing, you're always talking about breadfruit. And when you talk to the average Trinidadian, when I say breadfruit, they only know about oil long. And I say, what else? They say, well, mommy could cut it up and fry chips. And at the end of the conversation, they can't talk to Maharaj again about breadfruit. And on top of that, if I offer you one, you can say it's a yellow breadfruit, right? So it shows maybe it shows how limited we are in exploring the potential of the foods. Agreed? But then when I have this vigor to understand what real poverty look like, to understand for people who are looking for opportunities. Not everybody could grow acres of hot peppers like my friend Gautam. Not everybody could grow acres of pineapples like the men and the women in Moruga Tableland, in George Village and so on. Not everybody could do that. Not everybody have cocoa fields and so on. But with one breadfruit tree, you could make a difference in your own circumstances. And I'll tell you why. Anybody here play golf? Nobody play golf, right? I never play golf in my life. I take a picture of a golf course one time. But the fact is, this little country spent $3 million, maybe more, to upgrade the Chaguaramas golf course. And I found that rather interesting. You know, we talk about we hardly have money in this country. We see so many people going without. Even with this COVID, every day, tens of thousands of hampers sharing across this country. On top of that, every one of them have an imported packet of rice. You know that? We'll talk about rice another day. But if we talk about this staple breadfruit, that $3 million that upgraded Chaguaramas golf course could have purchased 120,000 breadfruit trees. Right? That is probably one for every household. Or for sure, every street in this country could have a source of food. Right? 120,000. That tree will start to produce food in about 3 years. At maturity, those 120,000 trees would give us 90,000 tons of food mass. Think about that. I'm sure you only accustomed seeing 5 breadfruit on a table by the road. Not so? That is about 30 pounds. But imagine what 90,000 tons of breadfruit could look like. But if you have that volume, it means that my Cherendo had a run down by certain places to buy flour and aloo mix up as fries. Not so? We could offer a differentiated product right here. You could offer different things made from that. After we talk here, you could check online and see the whole range of things the world is producing with the breadfruit. Not only oil long and chips. All right? But as private people, we started to sponsor these trees. And so far in a year and a half, we probably gave freely about 4,000 of those breadfruit trees. And I'm saying to you that if we could demand of our government to plant these things in all schools, in places of worship, in community centers, in community spaces, and bring the food supply closer to the people who need it, then you have a lot of problems solved in this country. And forget how much you could eat. You can eat all of that. That is going to bring economic and entrepreneurship opportunity. Because the people who sit down home and figure they're powerless, you feel demotivated, you can't go out and look for work, too competitive, all of that. You could go and cut your little breadfruit, you could make lunch, and you could start to sell. You could make chips and ask the parlor in the village to supply it. You could do different things, whatever it be. The flowering trees, for example, the breadfruit tree, is a natural insect repellent. So we don't see regional corporation passing around spraying, at least they don't spray by me where I come from. So, but these are things, it adds to green space, it adds to watershed. You don't have all the land slippage with erosion when rain fall. Right now, look, we speaking here and have a thunder shower here. So all of these things lends itself to why breadfruit. So while Gautam would have spoken to you about traditional agriculture, I would also like to encourage you, if you do not have access to land, in terms of agricultural land, there's still something you could do that could contribute to the national food basket. You could earn some money for yourself, and you could add to a better standard of living regardless of the community. So I've brought some little education cards that I hope you could maintain. It points you to some of the basic benefits of this food. It also points you to our website, plant1tree4tt. We also have plant1tree4me.com. I invite you to follow us. Our Facebook platform is breadfruittrees.com to learn more, to interact, to meet other breadfruit farmers. People like yourself who are involved in promoting a greener and better Trinidad and Tobago, to see what are somebody thinking, what are some of the motivation that exists right in this little country, rather than reading all the fancy things abroad and so on. And I've also brought with me 10 trees. Of course, these are very young nursery plants. I'd needed to keep them in a cool, shaded area, maybe until they reach about 2 to 3 feet high before you put them in the ground. But I also, through the office here or through maybe Gautam, we could try to find each other in the next 3 years. But God spare life, I will come back and try to find at least one of you, one of these trees, which we have been doing with the other 4,000 by the way, to see when they're bringing food in your community. And I bet you can eat all from the tree. And if you never talk to your neighbor will come to find out when they get in their one. All right? So it have a lot of psychology behind agriculture. There's a lot of psychology behind rural development, as I was sharing with him as well before. When we talk about rural development, in this little country, there are people who sit at the end of the travel infrastructure. In other places, they might call it behind God back. I like to say they're at the end of the travel infrastructure. They're at the end of the road. Meaning that Point Fortin, Moruga Tableland, Toko Sandy Grande, some parts of La Hoqueta Talparo, the roads finish inside there and so on. Labre. Right? Or even when you go up the line in Matlot. So when you think about these places, they feel so far removed from Port of Spain, from where all the resources, all the fancy people are and so on. Right? When you're looking for an ATM machine, for those of you who leave here to go up Toko, the last one is in Valencia. The one in Toko, which I was a part of to help lobby for, that take how many years? It could only do withdrawals. It does not accept deposits. So the people from Matura to Matlot, how they save the little money? Think about it. Their money is in agriculture, domestic tourism, and so on. When you make $200-300 for the day or a little weekend hustle, you have to hire a taxi for $150 to come down Sandy Grande to deposit $50. That don't make sense. So there's a lot of financial empowerment and education to come with this sector. A lot of things that could be done in agriculture. All of it can be done in one sweep, one overnight. But you need 3 things, as I always share, which is consultation, collaboration, and coordination. If you don't have that sort of community-led engagement in this sector, people selfishly believe that this is only about vegetable production or animal production, the big men in poultry, and so on. But it's not that. This sector is all of us. 1.4 million people. We eat at least 3 times per day, or we hope to eat so much. All right? Which means there's a large volume of food passing through the system. And how do we tap into that as a resource? Right? A lot of people control that food supply. Where's your share of that? Whether it is for your own income, or how do you contribute to managing that to make sure it is healthy, wholesome, and sustainable? So thank you for the opportunity. I could talk all day, of course. But I appreciate the invitation to be here in Point Fortin. The rain is falling. I promise you I'm going to walk around the town before I leave here. I left home very early. I actually live in Shogunas. But I couldn't miss the opportunity just to share my little project with you and maybe inspire at least one person to press on. I have the trees here. Maybe, I don't know if Gautam have anything to say in wrapping up. And no, the trees are not giving you to go along the road and leave it and let it feel lonely and sad. I would like these trees to reach in homes where people could benefit the most. Right? You could eat half or 3/4, but make sure quarter of the production share on the street. If that is the deal we're making. Right? So, I have them there, if you don't mind. We could share them.
If you can repeat for the mic, for the benefit of the viewers online.
Hello?
If you can repeat your question.
What I have said, all what you have said was so true. When you have your breadfruit tree and it bears so much, you have to share to your neighbors. You cannot eat all. At the beginning of this year, I had a very large breadfruit tree, yellow one, and I was so disturbed when I recently saw the breadfruit itself, how it end up to my foundation and raise my foundation. So I'm telling anyone that get the breadfruit tree, do not plant it near to your home because it causes a lot of destruction. I actually see the root push the cesspit tank, back at my house, it started to raise. So this is something people have to know. Do not plant it near your house. Very far away. There's a tree, it will travel from here to the depot. The root will travel very far. So we have to understand that.
Very valid point, but as I encourage you to join the platforms we have online. I mean, everybody online. I can't ask who and where. Even my mother has used WhatsApp for free calls. So the idea is you need to learn also planting techniques. We could talk about that in a different forum, but you don't just dig a hole and put it on autopilot. All right? When you put it on, you're within reason. You look at your, as the gentleman said, the constructed spaces, your wall, your house, and so on. But even when you put it in the ground, you'll see different techniques online. Something as simple as galvanize. Where the roots are, you make a little bound and you put down your plant. So the roots train themselves to go down rather than across. It depends on the depth at which the plant is planted. Of course, it needs to become, as I said, leave it for about, till it get about 3 feet high. That's a significant plant that you could, put down in the ground firmly. Different techniques like that. So I appreciate the point, but of course we are living in built environment, which is a very valid contribution as well. All right? Good. Any other question for myself or Good.
Okay, thank you very much, Point Fortin. Mr. Obika also for inviting us. I think we'll invite him up to assist with the sharing of the breadfruit plants. So, Obika.
So I'm sure when you left home today, you didn't know you was going to get some plants to your house. So
Volunteers first who need one. Who need one could come and collect. Yeah. Huh? Okay, yeah, yeah.
Good. Let me get a picture with you so I can go up
Yeah,
to
do,
my
do,
shop.
do the handshake.
Yeah.
He said do the handshake.
Oh, this,
Thanks a lot, Umar. That
No problem.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, give up, come. Next volunteer, who needs a breadfruit?
Send one out.
Okay, well, hand out. Yeah. Okay, so we just give out from right here who's closest. Come.
Oh, you want to come
Huh? All right, we'll give it out here. Yeah.
So what will happen is, we know some people shy, so we'll be distributing it to you so that you can carry it home, and then of course you have seedlings as well, seeds and seedlings. So I want everyone to give a round of applause to our presenters. So I see the cameraman looking for you thing too, eh? Yeah. I see him looking. All right, so basically we'll close off this segment now. Our next presenter will be with us from 1 o'clock, or just about 5 minutes to 1. He will be joining us via Zoom. So what will happen is we'll play a video before he joins us, and then he'll come on via Zoom. That has to do with a port project in Labre, and you'll have opportunity to ask some questions. Again, we'll do that via the link up via Zoom. Okay? So the next presenter will be Mr. Gosain, Mr. Deo Gosain. So I guess we will end this presentation at this point in time, and we'll start another live session after we've played the video. Okay?